And then one more vital thing, and this is what I really feel like you can walk out of here with and realize you have a purpose and a role in this world, and that is this. Paul was living in a generation in which there was a tiny slice of people who knew the physical Jesus. All right? I just want to paint the contextual picture for a moment. Paul's writing this somewhere between 55 AD and 63 AD. He's probably dead by 64, if our history's correct on Paul. The bulk of his ministry happens in the middle of the first century, less than a half a generation after the resurrection, the ascension of Christ. Paul's peers in the gospel, the Peters, the James, the Johns, walked with Jesus. And that's why they held such high regard among the early church. There's a little bit of just a little hint of bitterness at times in Paul's writings about that he didn't walk with the physical Jesus, and that he even calls himself an apostle born out of time. He's like, I don't have to answer to these guys. I follow the same Jesus, but that's the seat of the church. We're talking minuscule that actually saw him, to the point that by 2 Corinthians 6, Paul goes, none of us know him according to the flesh anymore. Like, we don't know the physical Jesus. Now, if you were standing at the foot of the cross and you saw the spear go in his side and blood and water flowed and it splashed on your face and you touched the robe that the soldiers gambled for and you heard Jesus say with his own mouth, Father, forgive them, they know not what they do. The impact that the suffering Christ would have on you, we watch a movie of Jesus dying and we get impacted. Can you imagine standing there? Almost no one could, because almost no one did. And by the middle of the first century, there's not very many people left who saw the afflictions of Christ. Here's the problem. The gospel is a gospel that is spread through the message of affliction and sacrifice and death. And yet you can't watch Jesus sacrifice and be afflicted and die, because there was no one videotaping it. And so what does the afflictions of Christ on the cross lack for the Colossian church? None of them get to see it. God can't prove his love to the Colossian church through the cross that they can't see. Paul was so big on this that when he writes to the Galatians later, he says, I've preached Christ so much in front of you, it's as if he were crucified in front of you. He says that to the Galatian church. Why did he do that? Because he knew that if you could just see Jesus die, oh man, you'd believe in the suffering love of God, because you would hear Jesus say, Father, forgive my accusers and my killers, they don't know what they're doing. And you would say, that's the love, that's a love I'll die for right there. And so Paul, knowing that no one could have that kind of revelation, says, you can see it through me. I fill up what his afflictions lack. Because to me, the only thing his afflictions lack is that we don't get to see them. But if we'll open our eyes to people being afflicted, to people being stepped on, to people being persecuted, to people being hated, to people being destroyed, if we'll open our eyes to them, stop segmenting them, marginalizing them, politicizing them, stop making them the enemy, stop making them the us, the them to your us. If you can see in that a little bit of suffering and a little bit of pain and a little bit of heartache, mingled with rage and confusion and embarrassment, sure, that's what you're going to see in it, because that's what we put into our suffering. But if you can see Jesus in that, then what that person is doing is filling up what the affliction of Christ lacks, because your eyes get to see the stranger in pain, the hopeless one, the hurting. And you get to see it in your brothers and your sisters. You know why community is so vital? Because we get to bring our struggles and our pain and our failures and our issues and our difficulties into the same room. And in you, and when you suffer, I get to watch you fill up in your body what I can't see Jesus fill up in his. Because I don't get to go see Jesus at Calvary, but I get to watch my brother. Amen. And so how I watch my brother respond, that becomes my Jesus. Not I serve him, I see Christ through him. Now, I point to this brother for that very reason. Because then you take the affliction and you go, I'm feeling. Listen, that helps when you're the one being afflicted. Because then you can go, I receive in my flesh. I fill up in my flesh what lacks in his affliction. When someone watches me go through this, may they see what they are not seeing in what my Jesus did. May they be able to see it in me. May they be able to see it in how I come through this and how I continue to praise my God and how I don't walk away from the faith. May they see that. And in seeing that, Jesus said, they'll see your good works and they'll glorify your Father which is in heaven. And that's what Paul said for the church at Colossae. He said, I want you to see all this bad stuff happening to me as a filling up of whatever you lack when you look at Jesus. If you can't see it in Jesus, see it in me. And man, if we could start to live that way. I'm not saying we'd be excited about afflictions, but I'd say we'd stop blaming God. Amen. And at least we would start to say, Father, bring healing, bring a touch, bring a miracle. But whatever you bring, may you shine like a light through how I walk through this affliction. Teach me how to walk through this affliction. Because I could fill up in my flesh whatever's lacking. When my neighbor looks at the church and they're discouraged with the church and they're mad at that pastor and they hate God and they're sick of the Bible. And then they watch me. And if I'm not careful, I can cause them one more reason to doubt God because all I do is whine and complain and let it destroy me. Or I could be the first person they ever see who walks through the fire with the Jesus I know that is with me. And may I fill up in my body what's lacking in the afflictions when they look at the church or when they look at Christ. Not because I'm their Savior, but because I can shine a light on my Savior. And maybe in me they can see it.